Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. We're bringing this to you on Earth Day, and the topic is very pertinent to that. So we're going to talk about how sustainable is your data storage. We've got a three-part panel today with myself from Arcitecta, Fujifilm and Spectra Logic. And our presenters today are myself, Eric Paulette, Director of Product Marketing for Arcitecta. We have Rich Godomsky, Head of Tape Evangelism for Fujifilm, and Matt Ninesley, Senior Product Marketing Manager for Spectra Logic.
Thanks very much, Eric. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you guys. This is going to be a great webinar and a good topic, being Earth Day. And as we've seen and we'll continue to see in this presentation, there's a lot of climate change issues that are affecting the world today, and we're trying to find how we can better affect the world for the future, how we can make our storage more sustainable, and just add to the health of the environment. And as we've seen, enterprise storage is consuming more and more of the available power in the data centers. There's new technology coming around, the SSDs and HDDs that are consuming tremendous amount of power and electricity compared to some of the other technologies that are available, like tape. And it's really up to us to find ways to leverage these less power efficient or less power consuming technologies so that we can better be prepared for the future ahead. And some of the stats that help to shine a light on this are the fact that global data centers are producing 2% of the CO2 emissions in the world right now. And they're actually consuming 7% of the electricity. This is projected to rise to 13% by 2030. So data centers are consuming power, they're putting off CO2 emissions, and we see things like GPUs and other new technology that's really driving this power consumption. And some of those technologies are also more expensive. So how do you find this balance? How do you find a way to leverage sustainable storage? And really what it comes down to is understanding your data too. I mean, that's a big part of it. The active data, most data really is inactive after 90 days. But how do you move that off to somewhere that is more sustainable and less power consuming? It's a difficult thing. So you need other types of infrastructure, software, maybe a data management solution that has integration with different technologies, supports multiple protocols, multiple storage mediums. Tape in particular is one that we're going to focus on today because it has such an advantage when it comes to power consumption, as well as longevity, CO2 emission, and waste. So as I'm going to pass this over to Rich, we're going to learn about how intelligently placing your data as it's aging into an active archive that is created and based on a sustainable technology can really help to lower your CO2 emissions and the waste that you have coming out of your data center.
Yeah, thanks very much, Eric. So let's look at some of the trends that are driving higher CO2 emissions, and certainly just the very simple overall growth of data, growth of persistent data that needs to be protected, retained long-term. There's actually a 9x growth projected by further market research between 2022 and 2035, going from 4.8 zettabytes to 43.3 zettabytes. Now, a zettabyte is a tremendous amount of data. Just 1 zettabyte is equal to 55 million 18 terabyte hard disk drives, or 55 million LTO9 tapes. So it's a tremendous amount of data and requires a tremendous amount of power, cooling, and that's really the crux of the issue. And the reason why this install base is growing so much is because the value of data is increasing. We can apply analytics to it. If we can apply analytics to it, then we can make better data-driven decisions, and therefore companies, organizations can derive competitive advantage from the data. So the trend is more and more data is being generated, and more data needs to be retained for competitive advantage. As we'll see on the next slide, the implications in terms of power consumption. So further market research is projecting that if we remain on this status quo on the current trajectory, then by 2050, we will have had a 50x increase in power consumption between 2010 and 2050 in the data centers. And it's clear that we can't sustain this. This is not sustainable. So something has to change. And as Eric mentioned, with an active archive, intelligent data management, data can move from energy intensive tiers of storage to more economical and eco-friendly tiers of storage, like today's automated tape systems. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see that the storage itself in 2020 was about 17% of the data center energy budget. But that's predicted to grow to 29%. So storage will increasingly be under the microscope. CSOs, chief sustainability officers, will be putting pressure on the chief information officers, and they will be coming to the data center managers and looking at the power consumption in the data center, and storage will be under the microscope. But as Eric mentioned in the very beginning, good news is there are ways to take advantage of more eco-friendly storage, and active archive is certainly one of those. So I'm going to turn it over now to Matt. Oh, I'm sorry, this is my last slide. So really what we're talking about when you do move to tape solutions, you're talking about an 87% reduction in energy, and therefore an 87% reduction in CO2. And now I'll turn it over to Matt for details.
And so when we talk about that lower amount of CO2 or CO2e, it really is it's good to understand that it's the entire life cycle of the product. So it's not just while you've bought a storage appliance and you have it in your data center, you have it plugged in. It's actually, you need to understand what it means from all the way from extracting minerals from the ground, turning those into things like steel and plastic and composites, manufacturing that into a storage appliance. So that could be a tape library or a disk subsystem, all the circuit boards, everything else that goes into that product, getting it from the manufacturer to you, and then using it for some amount of time. And that really depends on what that storage appliance is, whether it's a 3-year lifespan or a 5-year lifespan or 10, 15, 20 years, depending on how you're going to use that piece of storage over time. And then at the end of it, there is going to be stuff that has to get, disposed. And ideally, a lot of that can be recycled, but there's still parts of it that do end up going into a landfill somewhere. So we want to reduce that as much as possible. But that entire chain is what makes up the CO2 equivalent that you look at for what you're putting into an actual product. And we can kind of break that down into 3 pieces. And one is the energy advantage. So if you look at just the emissions piece of it, the CO2 equivalent emissions of different types of storage over, a 10-year period. So we're going to store 100 petabytes for 10 years. That hard drive solution, it's 97% more emissions than you would with just 100% tape based. And that's a great number, right? We can say tape is 97% less. That's also not typically a very useful number because most people can't put everything on tape. You do have to use your data. You have to have parts of it that are much more accessible, that are easier to manipulate and extract value from. So that's where we start talking about this, an active archive and having, say 40% a disk, 60% tape. You're still saving almost 60% from a CO2 emission standpoint by just reducing that hard drive footprint by 60%. It's a very nice reduction. And then if we look at the next piece of it, you're going to look at the energy advantage. So that's where we start talking about at the end of that life cycle. What does that look like from an e-waste perspective? If you're going to have to get rid of stuff. And again, if you look at just tape versus hard drive, again, tape, you've got an 85% less e-waste at the end of that whole cycle, but you probably can't really use just tape. So if you did that same 40%, 60% tape, 40% hard drive, you're still saving over 50% in e-waste after that 10-year period. So it's a really big reduction, and that means a lot to the overall impact of what these products are doing to the world. And then the last one,
yeah, Matt, let me just jump in here. So the reason for this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but so like HDD will typically be retired after 3 to 5 years and become e-waste, whereas tape media, tape drives, the recycle period is more like 7 to 10 years. Is that one of the key drivers here?
That is a big piece of that driver. You're right, Rich. And that's really important to understand, is that you're going to say do a refresh after 5 years on a disk system. A tape system, like Rich said, is typically 7 to 10, and many people are pushing that even to 10 to maybe even a little bit longer, depending on the generation of tape that they're on. So you're essentially recycling half of stuff almost in the end. Which is, there's a huge reduction there. And then the materials you're getting rid of also, every tape sitting on a shelf is a plastic case with a plastic substrate and material sputtered onto it. Every disk drive is a metal case with circuit boards and motors, and there's a lot different types of materials in that product that you're actually having to recycle or having to throw away at the end that have a much larger impact.
Great.
And then the last piece is really the TCO, and this is where it's actually hitting your bottom line of what is the cost advantage of that kind of a solution. So same kind of thing. Part of what's driving the same TCO is that refresh cycle. So you've had to replace the entire hard drive system probably once in that time period, in that 10-year time period. In the tape system, you most likely can get away very easily with keeping it on tape for 10 years, even a little bit longer if you wanted to. But that TCO advantage, even in the active archive type of situation where we're 60% tape, 40% hard drive, you're still seeing almost a 50% advantage in that 10-year TCO. And that's real money. That, you're talking, $8 million here in savings. And we're seeing energy prices continue to increase. And we're really seeing that, especially if you look at, Europe and other places outside the US, those prices have gone up a lot in the last 3 to 5 years, and we're going to see that everywhere. So this isn't going to get any better. And we showed that on some of those prior slides on the cost of energy over time. The advantages of tape and of an active archive tiered solution really will continue to improve more and more and more into the future. So kind of, in conclusion, it's almost a no-brainer to look at using the right type of storage for the right data that you have in your environment. So stuff that you're not actively using all the time, data that you need to keep forever, but you're not going to read more than maybe once a year or even longer. Put that on the right storage media, put that on an archive solution, and then have a software package that makes it really easy to move it back and forth, so you can really monetize the entire data set over time as needed. So, if come out, check out the Active Archive Alliance website. There's a lot of really good material out there that talks about multiple companies that are part of this group that really can make that a seamless transition and give you good ways to put data on tier 1 all the way down to archive, and from a hardware software perspective, show how that can be used over time. So thank you all very much.
Thanks for that conclusion. I could not agree more. Active Archive really allows you to keep all the data online all the time. And Active Archive is about getting the right data in the right place at the right time, at the right cost, and at the right energy profile. So a good summary there, Matt.
Perfect.
And thanks very much, Eric, for setting this up today.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining. It is an important topic, and I'm glad that we've got support from the industry as well to help shine a light on this and show people the way that they can leverage affordable storage to also help make a sustainable solution. Thank you guys, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.